Hello, hello. Welcome to English Extras. My name is Jean. If you're here, it's because you don't want to sound like a textbook. You're in the right place. This podcast is to help intermediate and advanced learners find alternatives to textbook English so you can express yourself authentically. Before we begin, if you want the transcript for this episode, you can follow the link in the description. Reading and listening at the same time is a great way to improve your English. And I also include definitions of words and phrases I use in the episode, as well as example sentences at the end of each transcript. Ready? Let's begin. In episode 22, I talked about 5 common mistakes and how to fix them. I covered a lot in that episode, but there was still so much to talk about. So, for this episode, I'm going to share 3 more common mistakes, as well as how to fix them. In this episode, I'm going to talk about when to use to versus when to use either, when to use make versus when to use do, and when a verb requires an object versus when a verb can stand alone. If you make any of these mistakes, this will be a useful episode for you. Let's start with to versus either. To and either both serve the same function. They both show agreement with a statement, with what someone says. However, they're different in how they agree with that statement. The question we need to ask ourselves is there a negative grammar structure, such as not or never, in the sentence you are responding to? If there are no negative grammar structures, then we use to in order to agree. So, if someone says, "Oh, I love this movie," and you agree, because there are no negative grammar structures in that sentence, we're going to say, "I love this movie too." So, what if someone says, "I don't know this movie"? This statement has a not in it. I do not know, and it has been contracted to I don't know. If we also do not know this movie, then we can say, "I don't know this movie either." We're agreeing, but either matches with the negative grammar structures. What if someone says, "I hate this movie"? Hate is a negative word. So do we use either? Hate is negative in meaning, but it doesn't contain any negative grammar structures. So if we agree with the statement, we would say, "I hate this movie too." What about "I don't like this movie"? Take a moment to think about how you would agree with this sentence. Do you use to or either? The answer is either. We would say, "I don't like this movie either," because the original sentence has not in it. Of course, when we're speaking naturally, native speakers typically don't repeat the entire sentence. Very often, we just say, "Me too," or "Me either." So if someone says, "Oh my gosh, this movie is amazing. I absolutely love it," we can say, "Me too." So just remember, if it's positive, use to, and if it's negative, use either. Now let's move on to a very, very common mistake, and that is do versus make. Here's the thing. As a teacher, many students have told me about general rules they've heard about the difference between do and make. Honestly, I don't think it's very useful to use these general rules. There are simply too many exceptions. Instead, I recommend memorizing each one individually and pay attention when you hear native speakers use them. Let's start with the most common ones. The most common uses of do include to do research, to do homework, to do chores, to do nothing, to do someone a favor, to do damage, to do an interview, to do business. Some of the most common uses of make include to make a mistake, to make friends, to make a call, to make a decision, to make money, to make an effort, to make a mess, to make trouble. Don't worry if you use make instead of do or do instead of make. In most cases, the meaning won't change. It will simply sound weird. There are some exceptions, depending on what comes after do or make, but in general, the person you're talking to will very likely still understand your meaning. Now we have arrived at the last common mistake I'm going to share with you today, and that is transitive versus intransitive verbs. I know what you're thinking. I'm sorry, what versus what? Don't worry. You don't have to know what transitive or intransitive means. They're fancy linguistic terms that are helpful to know if you want to learn about the concepts more deeply. But for our purposes, we don't really need to know the terms. What we do need to know is that all verbs can be divided into two categories. Verbs that require a thing, or in linguistic terms, an object, and verbs that don't require a thing. It can be important to know which verbs require a thing and which verbs don't, because if a verb requires a thing and you don't say the thing, then the sentence is incomplete and sounds weird. Here's an example. I like. I love. I need. All of these sentences sound weird because they are incomplete. Like, love, and need belong to a category of verbs that require an object. I like what or who. I love what or who. I need what or who. To make these sentences complete, the questions have to be answered. I like owls. I love my brothers. I need more sleep. As a teacher, the mistake I hear most often is when a verb requires an object, but the speaker forgets or doesn't know to include it. So let me share with you my biggest tip: the power of it. When you and your conversation partner already know what the thing is, owls, my brothers, more sleep, Then you don't have to repeat what the thing is. You can simply say it. Or if it's more than one thing, you can say them. I like them. I love them. I need it. Not all verbs require a thing, an object. For example, many common action words don't require an object. I kick. I eat. I sleep. These verbs don't ask the question of what or who, but of course you can add this information if you want. I kick the ball. I eat an apple. I sleep on the couch. So you see that many verbs can take a thing or not. But in general, English is okay with relying on context. You don't have to continue repeating the same thing over and over again. In fact, you'll sound more natural if you don't repeat the same phrase. And don't forget the power of it. So those are 3 very common mistakes I hear from my students: swapping to and either, swapping do and make, and not including an object when the verb requires one. None of these cases are dire, meaning it isn't the end of the world if you make these mistakes. So, make sure to show yourself some patience. Learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. But we don't want to waste all our time worrying too much about our mistakes. As always, if you'd like the transcript for this episode, you can find the link in the description. Thanks for listening. Until next time, bye.